Welcome to Willow Healing Matters, the podcast. We are so excited to have you joining us on this journey where we explore different ways to empower your soul, whether it's healing in your kitchen or all the way up in the corporate world. Come with us as we look into different ways to heal your mind, body, and soul. Hey everyone, it's Catherine from Willow Healing, and I am delighted to have Jim Marshall with us here today on the show. So, Jim has devoted over 50,000 hours to the study and practice of multiple dimensions of human potential and development. He received a classical education at the Jesuit Military Prep School and was accepted into engineering school while still a junior in prep and attended college on academic scholarship. He then graduated college with a Bachelor of Science cum laude, and while still an undergraduate, he began to study an alternative arts and sciences, which today could be described as transformational and holistic. That's very cool. And after 28 years of formal education, Jim had a long career as a human development engineer. He has successfully treated and or trained hundreds of clients and is the inventor of septemics and several conscious expanding systems. Jim's areas of expertise include psychology, philosophy, theology, parapsychology, science, engineering, mathematics, law, literature, history, music, organizations, metaphysics, military science, human potential, political science, physical culture, and education. Wow, welcome, Jim. So excited to have you on the show.
Hi, Catherine. I'm glad to be here.
So, you have had quite an evolving career and you've scoped so many things. What led you into septemics and the human potential, I guess, would be my first question.
Well, as far as human potential, and septemics is a separate thing, but let me just answer the question as far as human potential. So, really, the story began when I was accepted into engineering school at age 16. Now, of course, I thought at the time that I was going to be engineering physical things like airfoils and motors and electrons and so forth, like all the other guys. But by the time I had my master's degree, it was clear to me that I wanted to engineer the human psyche because that is the area of greatest unknown and greatest mystery. And more importantly, it is the area in which we as a race are failing miserably. 95% of the problems in industrialized society are because people don't understand people, don't
Agreed.
understand the wife, don't
Agreed.
understand the boss, don't understand the pastor, don't understand the boyfriend, whatever. This is a big problem and it affects everything because there's almost nothing that you can do that doesn't involve people. So, to make a long story short, I had a long career as a human development engineer using engineering tactics, principles, devices, and so forth to help my clients to attain higher levels of awareness, enlightenment, ethics, responsibility, and so forth. All of my clients improved as a result of our work together. But incidentally, I started to notice that I could predict the outcome of the session. Now, I did not tell that to anyone, but I made notes.
Yeah.
And as the decades rolled by, I came to realize that the client was at a specific level on a specific scale that I had previously observed. And as a result of our interaction, we go up to the next level up on that scale. Now, this happened thousands and thousands of times.
Yeah.
And every time it did, it verified my hypothesis because the clients knew nothing about any of this. They had no idea what I was thinking, how I was operating, what notes I was taking. All they knew was they came to me with some situational problem and I helped them with it. That's all they knew. So by 1995, I had about 32 scales that I had simply evolved and out of direct observation. I mean, I would see this in the people and just write it down. And then when I would go out into the real world, I would see the exact same thing. And again, from people who didn't even know me, they had no idea what I was looking at. See, but there it was, this exact same phenomenon. So I had one scale in particular that had 6 levels that by then I absolutely knew was correct because I had been using it for decades.
Yeah.
So one day I was pondering a difficult client, and I realized that this client was at a level on that scale that I had not previously observed. In other words, the 6-level scale actually had a 7th level.
Yeah.
And when I saw what that 7th level was, I immediately knew where to insert it into the 6-level scale. That was not a question. And when I inserted it, that scale now at 7 levels manifested mathematically.
Wow. Yeah.
Now, let me tell you what I mean by that. I took 26 semesters of math and loved every minute of it. I think in math. It's a very real thing to me. I see it in the real world everywhere I look.
Yeah.
Now, the whole point of math, for those of you who may be allergic to math, is that you start with a formula or an equation and you coax data out of it. That's how Einstein, for example, found E equals mc squared. Everybody in the math and physics community knows what steps he went through mathematically to get to that. So when you have data appear like that, that is a mathematical manifestation.
Yeah.
So when this scale went from 6 to 7, it stopped being a line, which is what a scale is, and became a plane, meaning it had depth and dimension to it, because there are all these data that fit into it that interacted with one another like a Chinese puzzle. And I said, whoa, I found something. Whatever this is, it has to be natural law because it has mathematics embedded in it, like, for example, the Fibonacci sequence.
Yeah.
So then I thought, I wonder how many of these other scales that I have are actually 7-level scales that had not been developed all the way because I wasn't developing anything.
It was just observation.
I was just helping my clients and making notes.
Yeah.
So, knowing what I was looking for, I studied all these other scales. And in a short period of time, each of them went to 7 levels. And each of them manifested mathematically. Mm-hmm. So now I have 32 7-level scales based on direct empirical observation that all have mathematics embedded in them. And having gone to school for 28 years, I thought, I never saw anything like this before. This looks like a new subject to me, one that could really help people.
Yeah.
Because it was obvious to me when I saw this that people, because it's natural law, would get it. And they do.
Yeah.
So then I thought, I could go from helping people by the hundreds, which is what I had been doing as human development engineer, to helping people by the millions if I put this in a book and get it out. So I'm going to have to write a book.
Yep.
So the first draft of the book was completed in December of 95.
Yeah.
And I immediately sent it out to colleagues of mine, all of whom had graduate degrees in a variety of subjects. And they all responded very positively. They had different responses, but distinctly positive responses.
Yeah.
And that told me this is exactly what I think it is, which is a new subject that could really help people. I then spent the next 25 years of my life working on this book.
Wow. That's dedication, Jim. Dedication.
Because you have to realize, first I had to discover the phenomena.
Yeah.
And I pretty much already told you how that occurred. Although I did find 3 more skills as I was writing the book.
Yeah.
Then I had to take this data and I had to use it to craft a workable philosophic system. So discovering the phenomena was the science part of it. But building the philosophic system is an engineering act. Now, as an engineer, I'm only interested in facts and results. That's how engineers are. To engineering, opinions and beliefs are utterly irrelevant.
Yeah.
So I had to create something that would work all the time for every person. Now, in science, if you're successful, the final product is a theory, like the theory of evolution or the theory of relativity. But in engineering, your final product is a thing that works. It has to work. In the world of engineering, you're not allowed to say, oops. Okay? You can't have the plane fall out of the sky and say, oops, I must have done it wrong.
Yeah, you can't forget that part of the bridge and let it collapse. Whoops.
That's
No.
right.
Yeah.
It has to work all the time.
Yeah.
Okay? So that took 20 years
Yeah.
to craft the system. Because simply having the scales, I had the scales, but simply having the scales is not enough to make a workable philosophic system.
Yeah.
So the most time-consuming part of this was expressing this in a way that would make sense to people, average readers of English. And my intent from the beginning when I wrote this book was to help the people of Earth, to give them this information so they could do better. So this was not an easy thing to do, to take a new subject that's mathematically based and express it in a way that the average reader will get. But I know I succeeded at that because some version of this book has existed now for 29 years.
Yeah.
And I've been watching people get it.
Yeah.
People get this. You could take some guy, doesn't know anything about it, open up the book, put the scale in front of his face, and they'll look at it and say, oh, yeah, this makes sense to me. I get this. I see how this works. And the reason for that is it's natural law.
And yeah, and even I was talking to you just before we started recording, and I quickly jumped on your site where you have your sample chapter, and I opened up the first scale that was on that sample chapter, and I went, oh, this makes so much sense. It was just so clear and so easy to go. And I hadn't even read the text. I just looked at it and went, okay, I get other people might need the text, but for me, I was like, no, I see that all the time, especially coaching. You know, you see it. You see those different levels of where people are in their terms of their, I can't remember what the scale was called, but, you know, the saint and the criminal and the loser and the winner and, you know, and the leader and those different levels there.
It's the scale of basic purposes.
Oh, there you go. Yeah.
Which is the first one in the book.
Yeah.
And that's the one that I told you about. I had it as a 6-level scale until I discovered a 7th level scale. And when I inserted it, it behaved mathematically. And you see, when you look at that table on which it's expressed, you see all these interlocking components.
Yeah.
It's very specific. So people have said to me sometimes, what book is your book like? And I have to tell them in all candor, I don't think there's ever been a book like this before. But each one of these scales is expressed in what you would call a table or a spreadsheet. And each of those is comparable to the periodic table of elements.
Wow.
Now, before Dmitry Mendeleev invented the periodic table of elements, there was chemistry, but he revolutionized it by making it easier to understand, easier to teach, and easier to learn.
Yeah.
Now, this does exactly the same thing for the corresponding 35 subjects, because there are 35 scales. If I may, I'd like to tell you the names of the 35 scales, and then you'll know exactly what subject matter is addressed in the book.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay?
Yep.
So there are 24 individual scales, meaning they apply primarily to an individual. And there are 11 group scales, meaning they apply primarily to a group. So these are the individual scales: the scale of basic purposes, the scale of personal influence, the scale of choice, the scale of permeation, the scale of thought, the scale of identity, the scale of evaluation, the scale of motivation, the scale of control, the scale of stopping, the scale of scholarship, the scale of literacy, the scale of human ability, the scale of memory, the scale of spiritual identity, the scale of mental deletion, the scale of aberration, the scale of physical fitness, the scale of justification, the scale of belief, the scale of equanimity, the scale of attack, the scale of conflict, and the scale of reaction.
Yeah.
And these are group scales: the scale of relationships, the scale of life spheres, the scale of government, the scale of civilization, the scale of survival, the scale of management, the scale of exchange, the scale of communication, the scale of allegiance, the scale of sexuality, and the scale of politics. Each one of these scales is unique and by itself could dramatically improve the life of the reader. Yeah. And let me give you a simple example of how that could work. I mentioned the scale of motivation. One of the most important things to know about a person is their motivation. Why is this person doing this? That's key, right? If you're making a judgment about a person, why does this guy want to go out with me? See, good question. So you could ask yourself, what is my mother's motivation toward me? What is my father's motivation toward me? What is my next door neighbor's motivation toward me? What is my boss's motivation toward me? Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And you could do this with everyone you know and everyone you've ever known. And every time you spot it correctly, you will have a realization. You'll say, that explains why my boss treats me that way. He has this motivation. Or something like that. Right?
Yeah. In my terms, I say, like, what's their story and why are they reflecting that in you? So that's how I translate that, because often when we're getting treated a certain way, it's either our reflection in them or their reflection in us, right? So it can go either way. So that would definitely be the motivation, right? What's going on there?
Yeah. Yeah, but really, remember, there are 35 scales and each of them is unique. So there's like 35 different ways to go with this.
Yeah.
Now, you could reverse the vector and you could say, what is my motivation toward my boyfriend? What is my motivation toward my pastor? What is my motivation toward my next door neighbor? And you could use it that way. You see, it's the reverse flow another 200, 300, 400 times. So you know the motivation of everybody in your life. That will clarify your mind and say, yeah, that's why I treat Joe this way. See? So that's just one scale.
Yeah.
So this is very user-friendly. It's very helpful to people to have this data. So let me tell you in a general way how this is beneficial to people, okay? I wrote this book to help people. Each of these 35 scales provides the user with an infallible way of determining the salutariness or beneficialness of any group, individual, or activity. If it moves the person up the scale, it's beneficial or positive. If it moves them down, it's detrimental or negative. So I'm giving you a yardstick by which to measure human affairs, which is an entirely new thing. More importantly, just finding out what level you or another person is at on any scale is by itself inherently enlightening and beneficial. Because every time you do it correctly, you have a realization. That's one of the ways you know you've found the right level.
Yeah. And knowing yourself and being aware of where you're at and how you can shift your life to move out of that cycle if you choose to is such a powerful insight and powerful knowledge that can help you essentially change your life. Exactly what you said.
And that, what you just said, brings me to the third part, which is once you know the correct level, whether it's your own or another's, you can improve that person by moving them up one level at a time.
Yeah.
You move them to the next level up. Now, let me explain this a little bit. If a person is, let's say, hypothetically at level 4, if he tries to get to number 3, he will get there because it's the next level up.
Yeah.
If he tries to get to 1 or 2, he will fail because it's too steep a gradient.
Yeah.
So every good coach, facilitator, therapist in the world understands that human development must be done on a gradient.
Yeah.
So, for example, a simple way of explaining this, I work as a trainer, physical trainer, right? So let's say a guy comes to me and says, Jim, I'm 100 pounds overweight. I can't fix this. Can you help me? Will you train? Sure, I'll train you. I'm not going to give that guy a 100-pound barbell to lift or tell him to go out and run 5 miles. That's malpractice. I would say, first I would talk to him, I would look at him, I would ask him some questions, and I would try to make a guess, right? And I'd say, let's see you curl 15 pounds. And I give him 15 pounds, right? And now he's doing the curls, and I see everything. So, let's say he gets to 12. How are you doing? Oh, this is easy. Okay, fine, put it down. Now I give him 20. Let's see how this goes. Oh, yeah, this is tough. I can do maybe 12 or 13 of these. I say, good. I want you to do 12 on each arm, 3 sets every day. And at the end of the week, we'll talk again. And at the end of the week, I would say to him, how are you doing? And if he said, this has gotten quite easy for me, I'd say, okay, let's try 15 reps. Yeah. Okay? But that's true for everything. And it's all about gradients. That's what I did with my clients for 40 years. I would spot the level the person was at, and I would get him up to the next level. So this is very personal and very specific. So you have to realize that the specificity of this is powerful because, and this is how it impacts your psychology, a person never knows why he's upset. Never. Sometimes he thinks he knows. Why are you mad at your wife? She burns the toast every morning. That's not the real reason. No. See? So I would get the guy in session and we would start working on this and he'd say, now I see. She reminds me of my mother. See? That's a realization. Yeah. At that moment, he stops being mad at his wife because he found the real reason. So when you spot this, it's specific. And so your upsets just go away.
Yeah. It's the same as when if you have a fear of something or fear of doing something, that's not what you're afraid of. It's something that's much, much deeper. So for me, for example, I had this fear of leaving my job, which I've been doing for so long, but at the same time, it's what I need to do to go to the next step in my life, right? But then what the truth was underneath all that was just comes back to school and the fear of not, getting high enough grades to appease my family. So, that was the real fear, not the actual leaving part.
Right. Now, there's another dimension to this. What is anxiety, right? The two big things in psychology, depression and anxiety, right? That's what everybody has, right? Okay. So what is that? Why does a person have anxiety? Because he's worried about something. That's what anxiety is. Yeah. And I already know when a person is worried, it's because he has a problem. And the only way a person can have a problem is if there is unknowns in it. So let's say a guy is being audited by the IRS in the United States, right? That's a big deal. He's worried. Why is he worried? He doesn't know what they're going to ask him, what they're going to think of his receipts, whether they know about that bank account. See, there's all these things he doesn't know. So you can get a person to stop worrying about something, meaning it's not a problem anymore. It's just a situation. See? So there's a difference between having a situation and worrying about it. Yeah. So this totally undercuts depression and anxiety when you use this material because of the specifics. You get into the specifics. And that happens because you have realizations. So, let's say the guy's looking at the scale of control, right? And he gets down to, let's say, level 5, and he says, this is my mother-in-law. This is exactly how she behaves. His relationship with her just improved because he understands her better now. See, he has an understanding. He says, that's why she does X, Y, and Z. So now he has a better grip on it. So he's going to have less anxiety about dealing with her, and he's not going to be upset about her anymore. So you can use this across your whole life. Yeah. Let me tell you precisely what Septemics is. Systemics is a philosophical science based on the fact that many phenomena related to humans occur in a sequence of 7 levels.
Yes, so true.
Literally.
Yeah.
Literally, the word septemics means of or pertaining to 7.
Yeah.
Septemics comprises a collection of scales, each of which breaks down various human phenomena into a hierarchy of 7 steps. So every person is at some level on every scale. This is important. It's like a blood pressure. You have a blood pressure. I don't know what it is, but I know you have it. In the same way that I know that you have a position on the scale of basic purposes, on the scale of personal influence, on the scale of choice, et cetera, et cetera. It's there. Now, the data is just sitting there waiting for you to access it. So you can ignore it if you want, but it's much smarter to use it.
Yeah.
Because it's not only you, it's everybody else. So
yeah, I often say that when you don't know any better, then you don't know any better. But if you do know better, do better. Yeah.
Right. So let me give you an example of how to use this, right? There's a simple problem that everybody has, right? So let's say you have a couple that's been dating for 2 years. They're talking about getting married. Well, that's a big step, right?
Yeah.
Wouldn't it be reasonable to ask, why does this person want to marry me? Right? That's a reasonable question. I'm not saying to ask the partner. Open the book. Look at the scale of motivation. There are only 7 basic human motivations. All the others are subsets of these. Right? So the guy knows this woman. He's been hanging around with her for 2 years. He knows all about her, right?
Yeah.
So now he reads the scale and he's able to spot her. Now, let's say hypothetically he says, level 1, love. That's the highest motivation of all. That's a good reason to get married. So let's set the date. But maybe that doesn't happen. Maybe he looks at it and he says, now that I think about this, I think she wants to marry me because I drive a Lamborghini, I fly my own Learjet, I have a 60-foot yacht, I live in a $20 million condo, and I have $10 million in the bank. See, that's a different motivation.
Yes.
I'm not saying it's good or it's bad, but it's different.
Yeah.
Now, what he does with it, that's up to him. He might look at it and say, okay, another woman who wants to marry me for my money, okay. But this one is smart, pretty, funny. We get along great. She's very reliable. I'm going to marry her anyway.
Yeah.
See, that could happen. But at least he knows because now he understands her better. But that might not happen. He might say, I don't want to marry somebody who wants to marry me for my money. I want to marry somebody who wants to marry me because they love me. See? Yeah. That's a possibility, see? And he might break up with her because of that. Yeah. Because she's looking for a wife. So now you might think in that latter case that he would be upset about that. And you would be wrong. He will not be upset. He will be relieved. He'll say, thank God I figured this out now before I wound up wasting 2 years of my life and owing her $15,000 a month in alimony.
And also subconsciously we often know, but we just choose to push that knowing aside because we don't want to listen or tune into it, and we just want to play to the story happening in front of us rather than going, there's something not right here and I'm not sure what it is, and instead of pulling at it, you just kind of bury it.
Right. Well, using septemics gets it from being something is not right to a specific thing across all 35 scales. Yeah. So all of these scales are very user-friendly because they're accurate, they're precise, and they're specific. And that makes them very useful.
Yeah, 100%.
So all of these advantages that we're discussing represent major steps forward for society. Each of these scales is an axis against which to evaluate human behavior. And combined, they empower one to understand, predict, and manage human affairs to a degree hitherto unattainable by most.
And so, if a person was using this for their own self improvement and was looking at the scale, how would they go about interpreting how to get from like level 4 to level 3 or wherever they are in that scale?
Okay, very good question, and I'll tell you exactly how. First of all, because I already know it's the next level up, I know if you're at, let's say, 5, you will be able to get to 4.
Yeah.
So you can never skip a level. Okay, that is one of the axioms of the subject. So think of it this way. If you're on the ground floor and you want to go to the 5th floor, you have to go through the 2nd, the 3rd, and the 4th, one way or another. Whether you take the stairs, the escalator, the elevator, right? Yep. So if you're on the 3rd floor, it's not hard to go to the 4th floor. It's the next one up. So I have solved the gradient problem that has bedeviled mankind for at least 6,000 years. And let me tell you what I mean by that. Most people have problems, dilemmas, situations, difficulties that they can't resolve. And more than 99% of the time, it's because they don't know the gradient.
Yeah.
So I'm giving you the gradients. In other words, each of these scales is the gradients for that corresponding area. So Isaac Newton famously shined a beam of white light through a prism and got a rainbow. And the rainbow was red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, violet. It's always that same sequence, because as the light slows down going through the thicker part of the glass, it changes its frequency, it gives a different color. It's never red, green. It's always red, orange. That is what these scales are like. They are natural law. Now, I know that. I spent most of my life working on this material because you have to realize, long before I got the idea of systemics, I was observing these data, as I told you before. I was seeing this and writing it down and using it in my life. It wasn't until I had that epiphany about this being natural law that I realized this was a big deal because people get it. This is not obscure. So you could sort of have sort of a vague idea about something, and this will make it precise. Mary is at level 4 on the scale of control. That explains why she does X, Y, and Z. Now you know how to deal with her. Now, if you want, you could try to help her to move up to level 3 because it's the next level up. But there's another answer to your question about moving up to the next level. There's data in engineering that says 90% of finding the right answer is asking the right question. Mm-hmm. So let's say somebody brings me an amplifier, says, I want you to fix this amplifier. Okay, so I have to start asking questions, right? Yeah. Okay, well, let's check all the tubes. Check all the tubes. Well, okay, they're all good. Let's check the power supply. See, different question. The power supply's got a defect in it. Change the power supply, now it works. See? So you got to ask the right question in order to fix something. So, in a sense, once you know your level, the next level up is the right question. So what you do is you throw out everything else and you just focus on the next level. So let me give you an example of how this would work on, for example, the scale of basic purposes. Yep. Every person has one of 7 basic purposes. Yep. And again, there are many, but they're subsets of these. So when you look at it, you find your level, you will have an epiphany. You'll say, now I see. My purpose is this. That explains why I can't get along with Joe, because his purpose is that. Yep. So this really makes it easy to understand who you are, what you're doing, where you're going, where you belong, who you should be around. Because you throw out the other 6 levels, they're not for you. And you can do this for everybody you know. So, for example, I know the basic purpose of every president of the United States, going back as far as Franklin Delano Roosevelt, and many of the presidents prior to him who I studied, such as Lincoln and Washington and Jefferson. Because starting with Roosevelt, we have speeches recorded. Not only do we have them written down, we hear him deliver them. We can see his body language, It's easy to study these people. So when Obama ran for president, I had no idea who he was. He'd only been in the Senate for 2 years. Most of us had no idea who this guy was. The people of Illinois knew who he was because they sent him to the Senate. So I said, this guy's running for president. I better find out who this guy is. So I conducted a septemic analysis. It took several weeks. I listened to his speeches. I observed his body language, et cetera, and I was able to determine his basic purpose. And that informed me, do I want to vote for this person or not? Because what could be more important than knowing someone's basic purpose? Because that's what the person is trying to do all the time, whether he succeeds or not.
I feel that's where a lot of us get lost, because a lot of us aren't actually in tune with our purpose or why we do certain things. So having that feedback of a scale, as weird as that might make people want to run because it's maths and engineering and all that fun stuff. But, just having it in that concrete format where you can go, oh, that's where I am and I don't want to be there, or I want to move up, or, and then you can make that choice from there and step more into your purpose and why you're here currently, right here, right now.
Right. But I have to tell you, when you correctly find a level, no matter if it's high level or low level, you always feel good about it.
Yeah.
Because it opens your mind. You say, that explains why I do this and this and this. I am at this level. And then you can say, well, I'm going to move up to the next level. So instead of just randomly flailing around not knowing what to do, I'm telling with precision what the next step is. And because it's the next step, it's not hard to get there.
Yeah.
Now, some scales are more volatile than others, meaning some of them change more quickly or more easily than others. The scale of basic purposes is not a volatile scale. Most people, probably 90% or more, are at one level on that scale for their entire life. Yeah. And part of the reason for that is they don't know what it is. Because when you know what it is, then you say, the next level up is this, and then you can get there. Now, it's not quick or easy to change your basic purpose. And if you study the scale, it's very carefully explained why it's not easy. You have to reverse your polarity, which is a big deal. As opposed to, for example, the scale of evaluation, people move on that by the minute. So some of them you can move more quickly or easily than others. But the main thing is you find the level, you have a realization. Now, as far as a friend or a loved one, you say, my husband, he's at this level, right? Don't tell him, because if he finds it himself, he'll have a realization. He'll look at it and say, yeah, I see where I am on the scale of choice. That explains why I can't get along with Fred. Yeah. See? And if you tell him, you're taking that away from him. Also, people do not like to be evaluated.
No, and then there's that feeling of a level of judgment rather than coming to that understanding through your own means. And sometimes people aren't ready to hear that yet, and they need to discover themselves.
That's right. So, sometimes the wife goes to the husband and says, what's wrong with you? You're not ambitious enough. You need to get a second job. You're not making enough money. That's not helping him. That makes him think about getting a divorce, right? What she should do is give him the book. Say, Fred, look at this. This would help you. Really? Yeah, just read it. See? And he looks at, I can see I'm low on this scale. No wonder I don't make enough money. So, and then he can move up. Now, let me explain something about moving up. You know how when you take your car out on the road, there's all this signage, right? you are required by law to obey that signage. Double yellow line, stop sign, no left turn, 35 miles per hour limit, right? So there's all these different things. Now, if you do not obey that signage, you are asking for big trouble. There are 100 different bad things that can happen to you. You can have an accident. You can kill somebody. You can crash your car. So these scales are like the signage for life.
Yeah.
I'm telling you where the edge of the road is. You know, you come around a curve, the sign says 35 miles an hour. Okay, so if you're smart, you slow down to 35 miles an hour or close to 35 miles an hour, right? Okay, 36, 37, but you're not going to go around there 60 miles an hour because that's crazy. They're telling you, right? Because some engineer calculated that and put it on a sign. So that is what this material is like. It's for your use. And it's not hard to do because it's natural law. So, you know, Fibonacci discovered the Fibonacci sequence. He was a mathematician, and he looked at these actual living creatures and saw that they had certain numbers. For example, if you take a sunflower and you count the seeds one way, you get one Fibonacci number. And you count them the other way, you get another Fibonacci number. So he kept seeing these numbers coming up. What are these numbers? Why? Why is it this number? See? So he was able to reverse engineer the Fibonacci sequence out of those numbers. And he gave it to us, so now we know the formula. So we know all the Fibonacci numbers to infinity. That is what I did with this material.
Yeah.
Instead of doing it with living creatures and numbers, I was observing actual people behaving and writing down what they did, what they said, how they improved. And over a period of many years, this became inarguably obvious to me.
Yeah.
That's what this is about.
Yeah, and I guess how you've spent so long, it's really honorable how much time you've dedicated to making it translatable and relatable to people so that when they
Yes.
pick up the book, they don't need an engineer degree, they don't need a maths degree. It's there and they can just clearly see, oh, yeah, that's me. And then move from that to change their life and then move from that to understand the others in their life as well. And like you said, not be judgmental of that, but get a better understanding and more meaning behind it. So then you can have more meaningful connections with people too.
Exactly. So, you know, let's say you have somebody who you can't get away from, like your mother-in-law, right? There's no escape.
Yep.
If you analyze her across these 35 scales, you will understand her extremely well. You'll know what she's going to say before she says it, what she's going to do before she does it, because this book is called Hierarchies of Human Phenomena: Analysis, Prediction, and Management of Human Affairs. Because every person is on at some point on every scale. So you can always analyze the person on that scale. And when you analyze the person, then you can predict what they're going to do, what they're going to say, and how they're going to do. And then, because of that, you can manage it. So she might not be interested in improving herself. She might not want to read the book, but just you knowing all about her makes a big difference. So let me tell you a little story about me. About 6 months ago, I met this beautiful blonde. I'm a single guy, right? And we were obviously very interested in one another. So we're going through the usual preliminary conversations like, what's your work schedule and what do you like to do on the weekends? You know, there's a lot of that stuff to sort of go through, you know, to sort of figure out if this is for real or not, right? So I had 6 or 8 conversations with her like that. And after one of the conversations, I said, she's low on that scale. So then we had another conversation, and I noticed, she's low on this other scale. And then we had another conversation and said, she's low on this other scale. And I start to realize, whoa, this is a downscale person. because there are people who are generally downscale people.
Yeah.
So, for example, if you have a guy who's a professional criminal and a drug addict and a wife beater, he is a downscale person.
Yes, he's going to pull your energy down, definitely.
If you analyze him, you'll find he is at or near the bottom of most of the scale. Not necessarily all of them, right? That's why he's like that.
Yeah.
Right? So I dismissed her.
Yeah.
I said, pass, no thanks. She was shocked, because I was probably the first guy who ever did that to her.
Yeah.
Because she was so beautiful and glamorous and congenial that probably any other guy would have jumped right in. And she actually said to me, who do you think you are? I did not say to her, although I could have, I'm the guy who knows systemics. Because that wouldn't have meant anything to her. But that's the correct answer.
Yeah, and I guess that comes back to the full circle of where we started about truly knowing yourself so that when you do meet somebody and you're getting that, oh, that doesn't sound like that's for me, and then you can refer back to this scale and say that's why it's not aligning with me, because they're not on my from my language, I'd say they're not my energy, but you would say they're not on my level of the scale, and that's why it feels incompatible, or that's why it's not going to work long term. So yeah. So as we finish up our time together, Jim, I often ask all my guests, and I already know your answer, but if they could do one thing to change their life, or if we could change one thing to heal the world, what would it be?
To heal the world?
Yeah.
That everybody who spoke English would have a copy of the Septemics book and read it.
Yeah.
Because this really helps people. Believe me, that's why I'm doing this. I had a lifetime of helping people. I had a whole career of helping people. And this really works because it's natural law. And let me say one more sentence to really bring this into focus. The data in this book are vital for every person, and can help you to achieve your goals faster and easier by explaining what might otherwise seem to be inexplicable or random.
Yeah.
If you talk to most guys and they're honest with you, they'll say they don't understand women. Most guys, they'll admit it if they're honest. And so all the guy has to do is, right? So he's dating this girl. Just analyze her across these 35 scales. And by the time he's done, he will understand her better than she understands herself. And he will know with specificity if he wants to continue. And if he doesn't, why not? And if he does, why? See, it's very specific, and that really helps you. It's like, cats and dogs are different. If you treat a cat like he's a dog, he's not going to like you.
No.
They're different, right? And people are the same way. So that's what this is about. And I hope people will take advantage of all the work that I put in this and make their lives better.
Yeah.
Because your success is my reward.
Yeah. Or just being open and curious and having a look, because when I opened that thing, I was like, oh, I get this straight away. It was just so clear. I didn't even go past the first 2 pages, and I was like, yeah, I get it. So, if you want to take a shortcut, you can at least look at the scales, right? And then pull it apart if you're curious to know more. So it's been such an insightful conversation, Jim, and I'm truly honored that you've put all this work into creating a scale of life really for people in general, and just how to not manage, but to know themselves more and to understand people more, so that we can bring more kindness and more understanding that is missing in this world. So yeah. So if anyone wants to connect with Jim or look up for his book, I will put all those links in the show notes for you as well. And a big thank you, Jim, for having you on the show. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Catherine. It was a pleasure.
Thank you for listening to Willow Healing Matters, the podcast. We have so much love and gratitude that you have taken the time out of your day to empower you on your healing journey. The views shared by the person being interviewed might not necessarily reflect that of the host and should be used at your own discernment. Trust what resonates for you and follow your heart and soul guidance. If you have any underlying medical conditions or mental health issues, please consult with your healthcare provider before pursuing any of the recommendations. Likewise, you can always contact the person being interviewed to find out more information. This can be found in the show notes. Remember to activate, align, heal, empower, and find love in everything that you do.